needed more advanced surgery were not allowed out. Many children were died with treatable illnesses. Some didn't die, but suffered enormously with treatable illnesses because they're not allowed out of Gaza. Now what's happened with Egypt, with the change in Egypt, is it looks like the border will be open. There hasn't been a huge change yet, but it's looking much better. However, there will still be another flotilla coming, because it's sort of like, what if California, finally we were allowed to go in and out of California by way of Mexico. And that was the only way. We couldn't use our coast, we couldn't use the north, we couldn't use the eastern border. Now they're both very similar coastal entities, the long coastal entities. And you know, imagine if there's only one place you could get in and out of your own land. It's not right. So there will be another flotilla, and I'll probably be on board. And the point with all of the flotillas has been both to do what they could to bring in, for example, operating supplies were not being allowed in. So even when Israel was letting sorry, this is some of your question, they were letting in some things, you know, dribbles of some things, but they weren't letting in, you know, cement couldn't go in, so that people couldn't. Most places, I saw places that had been bulldozed. Nablus had big parts bulldozed. They rebuilt very quickly. Gaza, when I went there 2 years ago, they still hadn't rebuilt huge swaths. Many people were living in tents then. Before, when I was there, it was only a few. And because they weren't able to rebuild, because Israel wasn't letting build, you know, critical materials for building weren't being allowed in. Certain medicines weren't being allowed in. So I know one doctor was saying for, you know, operations, they didn't have the things you needed for operations were not being allowed in. Now, presumably they'll start being able to come in through Egypt. But there's still the idea of being imprisoned where there's only one tiny little entrance and exit. That is still the political aspect that these flotillas will try to address. In addition to, they did before bring in humanitarian types of supplies, medicines, crayons, you know, that were being restricted. So for that reason, they'll come in. I hope that the humanitarian conditions in Gaza will improve significantly. There's a lot to catch up on, but I hope they'll improve significantly better every day.
I have another comment. It's a question / request. The language that we use to describe the world around us defines the prism of reality through which we see it. And one of the things that I've noticed in this conflict is that language is used as a weapon to imprison our minds and to imprison the boundaries of the conversation that we're able to have. So like one of the terms that I just heard you use is the term pro-Israel, to describe people whose policies are clearly destroying Israel, so that doesn't make sense. Another term is settler. You can't be a settler unless you're going to land that doesn't have people already living on it. When you go to land that has people living there and drive them out, you're not a settler, you're an ethnic cleanser. You know, the territories aren't disputed, they're occupied. These are all message words that the Israeli lobby tries to use and force on us. And I hear not only the Israeli lobby using, the pro-Israeli policy lobby using it, but I hear Palestinians using it. Palestinians refer to these people as settlers. How can we hope to have a breakthrough in our conversation and dialogue about this issue if we continue to accept this false terminology and this false framing of the issue? And so the request that goes along with that is, as a leader on this, you know, in this issue, would you take on changing the words on the wording, the language that you use on your website and in your communications, so that it accurately and responsibly reflects the reality of what's up?
Yeah, that's a great point, and a lot of that we actually are trying to do. We're such a small organization. You know, you're seeing about 1/3 of it right here.
Oh, you are so, you have no idea how coded you are. Well, actually, you probably do, but you probably do know how coded you are. But no, you're very influential.
Oh, thanks. But we're trying to. One of the things that we have an intern who's actually here on this campus is working on is and we would welcome more volunteers. We're not organized enough always to use volunteers yet, so you have to be self-starters. But we're working on a glossary. You know, because we have this news site where we try to post the news every day. It's not being posted today because I'm doing this, I'm the one that does it. But, so there's lots of terminology where it's hard, you have to think, what word do you use? Because often, even the really excellent press services in the Palestinian territories, Mod News, PNN, IMEMC are all very good. IMEMC is probably the best in terminology. But, well, you know, sometimes these words have just become so embedded that they're inaccurate words. They'll say, you know, there'll be a report about Israeli soldiers arresting somebody. Well, you know, this is kidnapping somebody. You know, when you're a foreign entity coming into somebody's home is not an arrest. An arrest is where it's your police force coming in and arresting somebody for a crime. So we're trying to, militant, you know, using the word militant. What we're tending to use is a member of the resistance. That's what they should be called. These different groups that's what they were called under the Nazis, under various places. They're resistance groups. Now, you might not like tactics of resistance groups, and there are different groups, but that's still what they are, and they should be. The correct term should be used for them. Pro-Israel is a good point. I mean, as you say, it's not pro-Israel. You know, I think it's very bad for all human beings. So we could, you know, try to use pro-Israel government.
This is what it is.
But I think that it's very important to think through the terminology. Like clash, I'll see, you know, many people use the word clash, but you know, a clash is where Israeli forces are coming in and shooting at unarmed people. So let's think about a better term for that. What just happened? A clash, people think that's an equal, you know, violent kind of altercation between two groups with sort of the equivalent power. It's not anything close to that. So I think thinking through the words, it's difficult though, because sometimes when you do that, you can be perceived as not being accurate and objective. You can seem like you're using hyperbole and being politically correct or some sort of negative type of thing. So that's the thing that's a little bit difficult, you know, if you, like, I never use the term IDF, you may have noticed. You know, the IDF stands for Israeli, they call themselves the Israeli Defense Forces. But they're occupying, they're engaged in offensive actions. So, you know, calling them the Israeli Defensive Forces is not a very accurate term, even though that's their official term. So that's why I usually call them the Israeli military, or the Israeli forces or something. You could sort of say Israeli occupation forces would be good, Israeli offensive, you know, but again, we want to be precise and accurate. But we also don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot and become unbelievable to people who don't yet know the facts. So it's sort of trying to balance out all of those important needs. And thanks for bringing that up.
Thank you for coming out. We hope today's event was informative. You can find brochures and pamphlets from If Americans Knew at the table outside. Please join us tonight in SSLA for a prize entitled What is Really Going On? And tomorrow at 12 p.m. at the flagpole for a talk on BDS with student activist Matan Cohen. And we should also have media service getting passed around, so please make sure you fill those out.